Hello, I'm Carolyn Jarvis, and thank you for joining us for this special broadcast of Global News Investigates. Over the next half hour, we'll be taking you through some of the biggest stories our team across the country has unearthed over the course of the past year. We'll also speak to the journalists who helped break these stories and held officials to account. And where else could we start but with the ongoing pandemic that has fundamentally changed all of our lives over the course of the past 9 months. For some of us, COVID-19 has meant working from home, schooling from home, and hitting pause on normal life. But for others, especially those in long-term care homes and their loved ones, it has meant extreme heartache. And it's in those long-term care homes the pandemic has exposed fundamental flaws in the system, sometimes with deadly consequences. Farah Nasser reports.
This is Mark Haven Home for Seniors, a nonprofit, government-funded, long-term care home in the Greater Toronto Area. Here, at least 17 residents died after contracting COVID-19, and more than 50 residents and staff have had the disease, including one now former staff member who has decided to speak out.
I had to learn to walk. I had to learn to swallow.
It was really difficult to watch, and I think a really moving interview that told a bigger story about what our frontline workers have been putting up with throughout this pandemic.
Global News revealed in November a dwindling supply of PPE may have allowed COVID-19 to spread so viciously during the first wave. We also found documents showing how Mark Haven's management flagged their concerns to health officials back in March.
I had on this stuff, but you're wearing this.
Was it this kind of a mask, or was it an N95? It was this kind of a mask.
Yes.
The idea was to try and tell the bigger story by focusing in on just one home in particular. So we thought if we could look in a great amount of detail at just one nursing home, then maybe we could find sort of universal truths that apply to all of them.
At several long-term care homes across Canada, caregivers struggled to contain the virus. Devastated families were on the outside looking in, while COVID-19 ran wild, killing thousands of residents.
We have been taking the advice of the best experts, our medical and scientific experts on this.
In Quebec, this seniors residence, known as the Heron, was the center of a media storm in April. Word got out about dozens of deaths at the home. But a Global News investigation showed the Regional Health Authority hired a crisis communications team hours before the news about Heron broke. The authority wanted to help healthcare officials with what to say to family and reporters during the crisis, and the firm billed taxpayers for it.
We are communicating with each of the families now.
Global News broke that news to family members of former Heron residents.
We revealed to them the contract mid-interview to get, their natural reaction, and it was quite like we expected.
We shouldn't be spending money hiding information. We should be spending money making sure that more people get information.
Katasa, the owner of the Heron, previously said it had trouble maintaining staff after more than a dozen workers were exposed to the virus. It also blamed the local health authority for being uncooperative and disorganized. Health and Social Services told Global News certain exceptional measures were taken to inform the public and be transparent with the loved ones of those in long-term care homes. But our journalists pushed government players for action.
I think the minister should perhaps take a look or ask for someone to take a look at this and request that it be fully justified in terms of hours worked.
I think it was quite courageous of him, and I guess we're satisfied that some people were speaking out finally, some elected officials, about this contract.
Seniors' residences were not the only COVID hotspots this year. Some on Canadian fields, where many seasonal farm workers from other countries left their families to work. Advocates say the pandemic led to a crisis for these seasonal laborers. There were multiple COVID-19 outbreaks, and some workers claimed they were mistreated or wrongfully terminated. In July, Erika Safala and Jesus Molina say they were fired from a BC farm and sent back home to Mexico after members of a migrant workers' rights group visited them at the property. Molina says it was not company policy or anything like that. Management did not want to keep us there, and he looked for an excuse. The farm told Global News the dismissal was due to multiple infractions following orientation on workplace policies. Some farms had a different story. We visited this family-run business in southern Ontario. For the last couple of years, it relied on the labor of a group of men from Mexico.
I'd been calling farmers across Ontario, and I was initially looking for a farmer who had brought in foreign workers despite the pandemic, but then I ended up getting in touch with Lisa, who kept her workers at home this year.
We feel a little bit of guilt because we understand that they rely on us to support their families. So it was a excuse me, tug of war, because, at the same time, they might be safe at home, but they might not have the funds that they need to make it through the year.
The government said it would step in to help migrant workers, announcing more than $50 million to improve oversight and support them. One of the most important ways of keeping everyone safe during a pandemic is testing. A crucial part of a COVID-19 test is this tiny piece of plastic.
Pipette tips.
Pipette tips.
Pipette tips.
And it was in very high demand.
I want to run out of the building screaming, and I have to tell you, our laboratory technologists are having moments where they have to stop and cry.
If you don't have these things, the labs will just shut down and the tests won't get done, and that'll lead to some of the backlogs that we saw just skyrocketed during the second wave of the virus.
A Global News investigation in October showed almost every sort of plastic used in COVID testing was running dangerously short. We contacted the companies listed on documents put out by Ontario Health, and only one of them responded, saying because of an American demand, getting any product out of the United States is impossible, and they're now looking to China.
One of the main things that we've learned from this reporting and other reporting is how important it is to create a domestic supply of things like medical grade plastics, personal protective gear, and going forward, how important that is going to be for governments, the federal government, and provinces to ensure that we have an easily accessible domestic supply of these really important things, so that the next time we have a health crisis like this, we're not caught flat-footed.
Still ahead on Global News Investigates, problematic procurement. The inside story of how one government organized a plan to stockpile personal protective equipment at a time when the world needed it most. It's no secret that there was an international scramble to find treatments and a vaccine this year. But there was also another race underway that started early in January, soon after the world learned about the novel coronavirus. The target? Personal protective equipment, or what we now refer to as PPE. As countries took extraordinary steps to find ways to protect their frontline workers, a Global News investigation revealed an unexpected connection to an organized crime ring. Jasmine Pisano has more.
It started with a call in January. Chinese consulates in Canada and around the world were reaching out in desperate need of safety supplies, scrambling to curb the spread of what was a new infection, COVID-19. In just 6 weeks, China imported more than 2 billion pieces of safety equipment.
It was a major mystery how it happened.
But a Global News investigation unpacked how China stockpiled that much PPE. It used a secretive agency within the Chinese government, the United Front Work Department.
From looking at these United Front networks in Canada, I discovered that they had been used. Chinese consulate officials had tasked community associations to send massive amounts of safety masks to China, to collect them in cities including Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal especially.
But reporting on this story led to another discovery.
I found that some of the persons involved in shipping PPE to China had connections to organized crime suspects that I was looking at in BC casino investigations.
And those connections stretch even into Ontario.
We are standing in front of an illegal gaming house.
Tucked away on a small street near Major Mackenzie and Warden Avenue in Markham, a 20,000 square foot mansion.
Police busted this Toronto area home back in July.
This is organized crime, thinking somehow that they are above the law.
The case is still before the courts.
A lot of it related to the coronavirus pandemic. Police sources said that because government casinos were closed, this led to more illegal casino activity, and that's allegedly what occurred in Markham, Ontario.
Another Global News investigation broke open the dangers of working with China in trying to create a new vaccine for the novel coronavirus. Our story started with these two men, Dr. Zhu Fengyu and Dr. Tao Zhu. They're the co-founders of CanSino Biologics, a company that signed a March 2020 deal with Canada to mass produce a COVID-19 vaccine in Montreal. But they're also involved in the 1,000 Talents Plan, a Chinese Communist Party program recruiting scientists and researchers by offering incentives such as salaries and lab space. The deal with CanSino has now been nixed after Chinese authorities blocked the shipments of the vaccines to Canada without an explanation. But intelligence consultants have said Ottawa should have seen the red flags sooner before dealing with CanSino.
We know from Global News today that CSIS had been warning this government.
There is so much activity going on at a high level in the diplomatic relations between China. And that makes reporting very difficult in Canada because Canadian elected officials are very reluctant, first of all, to say anything critical about China. Really, they're afraid of the backlash that will come and already has come.
After the break, the unseen harms of inactive oil and gas wells, why some may never run again, and the cost of their abandonment. Tens of thousands of oil and gas wells currently stand dormant throughout the Alberta landscape. It's an issue that's been growing dramatically in scale, and economic woes triggered by the pandemic have only made matters worse, leaving Alberta to face an environmental and financial reckoning. Julia Wong investigates.
There are 17 pipelines, a couple pump jacks, and 2 inactive wells on this Alberta property. Oil and gas has been here for decades, almost as long as Verna and Brian Fippin's family. But over the years, the blowouts, corrosion, and spills have taken a toll.
As things happen more and more and more, I begin to hate it. I begin to hate the petroleum industry.
There are now close to 100,000 inactive wells in Alberta, up more than 10% from last year, and a jump of more than 25% from just 4 years ago. And the COVID-19 pandemic may be making things worse. Global News obtained this presentation to the Alberta Energy Regulator Board through a Freedom of Information request. It notes many operators are shutting down production, some will likely not ever be able to restart, and some are not following proper suspension and decommissioning procedures.
We're always worried about bigger issues, leaks, and general environmental contamination.
The Orphan Well Association is funded by industry and is supposed to look after wells left behind. Governments have also chipped in.
We do feel like we're well situated to deal with this issue, at least here for the short term.
The last few weeks, the regulator identified 86 companies that failed to pay into the industry cleanup fund. It says some later made payments. Experts say if more companies go under,
the public will have to pony up, or the levy on continuing oil and gas producers would have to be dramatically increased.
We're very near that worst case scenario.
The Alberta government says it's exploring new rules to ensure companies can afford to pay for cleanup before they drill. It will also set new mandatory targets to reduce the number of inactive wells and allow landowners to recommend where industry should start.
We could see some potential for some further companies falling into insolvency.
So we put the tools in place. And again, this is something that previous governments never did.
You get into this business knowing exactly what those obligations are. We do have a few defaulting companies that are unable to discharge those.
Harold says defaulting companies are in the minority and there are safety nets for them. But for the Phippen family, the changes are coming too late.
Who's going to look after us? Nobody is. Nobody's looking after us.
Julia Wong joins us now with more insight into the situation that's unfolding in Alberta. Julia, what was the biggest revelation for you in this investigation?
Well, a story like this can often seem abstract, but the biggest thing for me was seeing how much oil and gas can affect the life of an average Albertan. Take Verna, for example. She's very passionate about the issue and obviously very well informed, and she's done her research, collected hundreds of pages of documents about the issues on her property. We talked for a very long time the day that we met on her property, and Verna is proud of being an Albertan. Her husband used to work in oil and gas, but it was obvious that over the years, her opinion of the industry has changed, and now she wants to tell her story.
So what was it like putting this story together?
Well, this is a very complex issue, and everyone, government, industry, others, they have their own spin, so we had to cut through that. We did a lot of digging to find out what was going on behind closed doors, talking to inside sources, filing freedom of information requests, and pouring through internal numbers and projections. We also spoke to numerous experts who guided us through the issue. Many of them didn't even make it into this story. Now, this has been an issue in Alberta for decades, and it won't be resolved overnight.
And why is this story so important to tell?
Well, experts say Alberta is at a tipping point. And as I mentioned earlier, this issue has been many, many years in the making, and experts say that we can't push it off for much longer. So there's that, the financial and environmental implications. But for people like Verna, it's about trust and knowing that the future will be okay.
Thanks, Julia. Coming up, he was put in charge of revamping the RCMP's intelligence operation. Now he's facing criminal charges. Details on the rise and fall of Cameron Ortis. It's not often that Canadians can peek into the secret lives of alleged spies and national security operatives. But Global News was able to uncover stunning details of the RCMP's intelligence operations through a series of investigative reports over the past year. Mercedes Stevenson explains what we discovered from confidential sources and classified documents.
This man, Alireza Ungai, is at the center of a classified CSIS report obtained by Global News. He allegedly assisted the government of Iran in clandestine wiring of monies into Canada through his Toronto currency exchange business, an allegation Ungai denies. CSIS calls the financial transfers a threat to national security.
Our officials have done, I think, a very exemplary job in identifying and gathering the evidence in order to deal effectively with this threat.
While intelligence officials pursue cases like these, we also discovered allegations of deeper threats to national security that reached the highest ranks of the RCMP. At the center of those alleged threats, Cameron Ortis, who the RCMP handpicked in 2016 to lead the Mounties National Intelligence Coordination Center. A Global News investigation revealed the force had big plans to become a worldwide intelligence player by putting Ortis in charge to handle highly classified information and to take Canada to the next level. But this plan backfired. Ortis has now been accused of being a spy. The former RCMP Director General of National Intelligence was arrested in 2019 for allegedly leaking government secrets. And Global News reporting showed there were allegedly signs of trouble well before his arrest. A trio of RCMP employees filed a lawsuit against the Canadian government, saying very early on, Ortis began to engage in a pattern of degrading and abusive behavior. The staffers who filed the suit say the most damaging revelation came when they learned the intelligence that Mr. Ortis had stolen and sold included their work, and they were told investigators believe Ortis systematically targeted them and attacked their careers as part of his larger plan to misappropriate their work and use it for personal gain.
We were talking to sources that were within these national security bubbles, and ultimately we were able to finally confirm a lot of the things we were hearing when they were made public through a civil action that was filed in the Ontario court. And that really spelled out some of the deep issues about complaints about ORTAs that had been really swirling around for years, really, and that hadn't been adequately dealt with.
The employees who filed the suit allege senior RCMP officials ignored repeated warnings about his behavior. And an independent review ordered by the force found senior leaders within the RCMP failed to effectively deal with his pattern of behavior toward employees. Ortis's lawyer did not respond to our request for comment.
What we discovered was that there were actually much larger issues within the intelligence center that he was running.
Cameron Ortis is being held at an Ottawa jail, now awaiting trial. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News, Ottawa.
And those were just a few of the stories we've uncovered this year at Global News, and there will be many more to come. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.